Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. Episode 185. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
Let's praise the sun today, Jared.
Let's praise it. And special guest this week, Uppercut's own Andrew Cogswell.
Hello. How are you guys?
We're doing well. Thank you for joining us for the first time. We appreciate you coming on by. Big week for Uppercut. Why don't you let our listeners know what exactly has been happening this week, if they haven't been paying attention to the internet or the gaming space at all on Twitter. So
I guess context, Uppercut is a site that focuses on marginalized voices in the industry. I am the only straight member of the staff. I am the only male member of the staff. So we focus on POC and LGBTQ voices and uplifting those in the games and indie space. And we are very big on paying freelancers. Everyone who works on our site gets paid. So when the EGM stuff happened and EGM decided to put a freeze on paying freelancers, despite a lot of them having either been in the middle of their work or finished their work, we wanted to step up. And so we started a PayPal pool. This was actually all Caitlin. They are the founder of Uppercut and my boss. This was all their idea. We started a PayPal pool. We wanted to raise $400 to pay 4 people $100, and so we could get their pieces on our site. That way they got paid and published. We had a little backlash from someone in the gaming space calling us out for the rate, and that led to us raising $12,000 in less than 24 hours. We hit 10,000 at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So about 6 hours after we launched, 6 or 7 hours after we launched the pool. So now we're going from paying 4 people $100 per piece to paying anyone that has an EGM piece that was in the works, accepting all of them and dividing up the money equally. We are taking none of this. We are not touching it. It is all going to freelancers. So yeah, it's been a long week, and this happened. The pool started on Wednesday. So that's what's happening.
It's always incredible when you see the internet's response to something like this, right? Especially in the current situation we're all in with COVID-19. You would assume that maybe people are a little bit tighter with their wallets because we don't know what tomorrow brings in terms of the economy and everything. But when you do something like this, a fundraiser for a good purpose, and like you said, it's not really advantageous to you guys fully because you guys are taking none of the money. You're just trying to help out people who are put in unfortunate circumstances. And it's great that they're going to be able to be paid now with the fundraising, something similar to what they would be. The backlash thing was weird because it's $100 is better than nothing, but yeah, it's great to see the response you guys got. And it's so funny how this all worked out organically, because obviously I talked to you, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then when I saw this popping up, I was like, oh, this is really cool, so.
Yeah, I'm the first person on staff to be on a podcast since this happened, because as of time of recording, this happened yesterday. But yeah, it's been a crazy response, and we're just very overwhelmed. And I cannot give Caitlin enough credit, because they literally messaged the group on our group text message and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. What are your thoughts? And we said, sure, go for it. And it was launched 15 minutes later. That's how much planning went into this, because we weren't expecting to hit the $400.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And we hit $12,000.
And for those listening, to reiterate, the reason we're not shifting you to a link or telling you to go someplace is because by the time this podcast goes up, the fundraiser would be over. So just to clarify that, what people might be wondering. It's really cool. I wanted to make sure we got that out in front of the podcast because, the world could use some good these days, and it's nice to hear of a story that went well. So it's great to hear, and it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you ready to hop into some gaming news now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Besides the Uppercut news, obviously. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, speaking of games, journalism, and writing, after 8 years, in my opinion, of incredible video game journalism, Jason Schreier is leaving Kotaku. He said his reason for leaving seems to be connected. His reason for leaving seems to be connected to the Geo Media stick to sports fiasco. If you guys don't remember this, this is where this whole upper management company has been a bit of a thing with the whole Hulk Hogan lawsuit that changed the founders of the company, and it got new ownership, and they basically told their editors to stick to sports and move away from comedy and what they actually do as writers, and it caused a flurry of editors to leave the company. And without saying that was the reason he was leaving, in Jason Schreier's post, he said that thinking about the situation, I forgot how he phrased it. He was like, it leaves a vile taste in my mouth.
Yeah, he talked. Yeah, something about being sick.
And but in brighter news, a part of this, he said he's taking a couple of weeks hiatus. He's going to be working on his second book, and he's going to be spending time with his daughter, which is great. But he's not leaving games journalism. He's actually returning to an unnamed outlet. It's unclear what outlet that is, because part of it says like new, so I don't know if it's obviously new to him because he's going to a new job, or if he's starting something up on his own, which is kind of interesting given our certain circumstances. But I think you guys are with me in that, like, Jason Schreier is the gold standard in terms of video game journalism, and it doesn't matter where he's writing, I'm going to follow him to that place, right? He's kind of earned that at this point in his career. I guess want to know from you guys, how much do you guys think this is going to hurt Kotaku in the long run? Because I think a lot of people go to Kotaku, not that it isn't full of phenomenal writers, but I think a lot of its traffic is because of the reputation Jason Schreier's kind of made for himself. And it seems like a lot of editors want to get out, right, of that whole situation because of the way it's handled from a top-down perspective. What do you guys think about Kotaku after Jason Schreier leaves?
It feels funny the way we talk about it, because it feels like it's just almost like a sports team that just lost like their best player, right? So I think that they're going to be impacted pretty heavily, because I don't go to that website all that often, right? But I follow Jason, and he always puts out obviously like a lot of insider type information. But I always appreciated, like, for the most part at least, his use of discretion, and he tries to explain that a bunch of like, I could reveal a bunch of stuff, but like it would only hurt people, and it's not like worth it, that kind of thing. But then he uses the same kind of sources to reveal the important stuff that, as we're now seeing, can make a big difference. So after reporting on all the shadier stuff going on at Rockstar, apparently things are getting better there, which is really cool. And it'd be hard to say it wasn't mostly because of what the reports he put out. I mean, also because of the folks that gave him the information, of course. But he obviously is a big part of that too. So I think this is a big hit for Kotaku. And it's cool to see that most of the industry, or at least this part, is in a place where someone like him has the leverage to do this. Because a lot of people, it's easy to say like, oh, you don't like your company or you don't like your boss, well, just get a new job. And that's like it's easy to say that, but a lot of people aren't in a position where they can just up and quit and leave. But so lucky for him that he can do that. So I think it's a big hit for Kotaku for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously, it's a huge hit. I mean, Gita Jackson left earlier this year along with a couple other people. Gita specifically moved to Waypoint or 5's Games or whatever it is. But at the same time, like, Kotaku is going to be fine. Because, I mean, how often does Jason put out a huge piece? Every few months?
Every
he does.
Yeah, like 3 months maybe.
Yeah, because they're huge research endeavors. Like, he's got to confirm his sources and stuff like that. He's diligent. And so Kotaku isn't surviving based on Jason Schreier putting out a huge piece every quarter. You know, like, there's other traffic going to that site. And there's good writers there. I mean, he's not the only one doing big exposés. He's just the one best known for him. Yeah. So, like, Kotaku's going to be fine. It's weird because, to me, Jason, as soon as I think of Kotaku, I think of Jason.
Yeah, synonymous.
Yeah, I feel like everyone does. But at the same time, like, they're going to be fine. I'm more interested where he's going because they would have to pay him pretty well. Because I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure he was living comfortably at Kotaku. I don't think he was making bank because it's like games media. Like, let's be honest. Like, there's not a ton of money there. But like with him being like, I'm gonna leave because of Geo Media, a company to give him an offer, like there's probably a pretty good bidding war. He had his options. He could have gone anywhere.
The big rumor right now is the Washington Post, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's where people think he's going to go because they have their new initiative where they're kind of focusing on games news in a certain vertical. To your point of like him, when I think of Kotaku, I think of Jason Schreier, but it also has a stable of really solid, great writers, right? I think him leaving is a plus to that site as well because now it could give an open space for those writers to kind of make their own spotlight for themselves, right? And maybe we see the quote-unquote next Jason Schreier, and by that I mean them getting the attention they deserve for the stuff they're putting out, not necessarily the quality of writing, because like you said, they have writers excuse me, I'm getting choked up, that are to the level of Jason. He's most known for it, right? So we'll see what happens there. It's interesting. I doubt people think that he might do something independent. I don't know if that's like viable right now, like especially for a writer like you said that puts out something as deep and involved as he does every 3 months. I don't know how that would play with the Patreon, or self-funded stuff. And yeah, I just don't think that's plausible at all. I don't think that's happening.
I can't think of a single games writer who is self-funded.
Exactly.
Why? Like Jason Schreier is great, but I mean, you have to put out content to make money, and his stuff is deep dives. Like they're deep. Like he can't be churning out fluff pieces every few days just to make sure he has content to put out for anybody who might do a Patreon with him. I don't think he's going indie at all. He's got to be going to some site, or not some site, but like some publication. I can almost guarantee it's not IGN. They won't. It's not his style. They're more news and reviews, whereas he does news, but like he does deep dive.
I wouldn't be surprised, sorry to interrupt you, if it's something that we would consider more traditional, like a Washington Post, getting quote unquote like the gold standard of it to rocket boost their initiative with that. That would make the most sense to me, because then you automatically have a face for that, right? So real quick, I wanted to ask you guys, and I'll give my answer real quick. Is there a Jason Schreier favorite piece you have at Kotaku? For me, it's the ragtag one. That one that kind of took the world by storm about Amy Hennig's Star Wars game and the fiasco that was with EA. I just remember sitting down and reading that for the first time, and it was so extensive. And you read about all of the awful stuff that happened. It was really eye-opening and surprising. And I think the internet that day was like taken back, of like, whoa, this happened. So.
Yeah, that was a good one. I mean, it was long, but it also like pointed out like how hard it is to make a video game, especially a giant video game with a giant IP like Star Wars. Because we're kind of, I mean, everyone loves to pile on EA for their mismanagement, quote unquote, of the Star Wars exclusivity deal. But that like highlighted a bunch of problems with how they were doing things there. But also to me, like that's a tough thing to do, to make a giant Star Wars game with all that you have to manage. So that was a cool part of that one too. Yeah, that was a great piece. Yeah.
Andrew, anything stick out for you? Memorable?
Yeah. So last year he released an article called "How BioWare's Anthem Went Wrong." And I will never forget where I was when I read that, because it was the day after PAX East ended. I was in an airport in Boston, waiting for my flight with my wife, and it popped up, and I was reading it. She went and grabbed Starbucks, and she came back. I'm like, holy shit, you need to read this. And she's like, what's going on? I was like, just this awful mismanagement. Like, they didn't have a name for it until like right before they announced it, because they didn't know what it was. And so like, to me, that will always be like the Jason Schreier article, just because that game came out and then Jason had an article almost immediately, because that game came out last year. And he was so quick on that one. And like I said, I was just finishing up PAX East, which was my first gaming convention. So like kind of still riding that high of, playing games on the show floor, running into people, going to panels, like, and then that happened, and it was crazy. Like, so that will always, that sticks in my mind whenever I think of Jason, is the Anthem article and reading it in the Boston airport.
That's a good one. I could have pulled that one too. Once you said, I was like, oh, that's a great choice.
It's so long.
Yeah. So is the Ragtag one, man. They're long. I don't know if you guys did, but I read a section of it and then came back to it. Yeah, just because it's a lot to read at once in a good way, So
Yeah.
next,
typically what would happen to me is I started reading that one I was at work, and then a couple minutes passed. I'm like, oh shit, I've not been working for 10 minutes just reading this article. I gotta come back to this later.
Yeah. This next one isn't huge news, but I thought it was a really funny intricacy in the industry. As if the two new IPs weren't already mistaken for one another enough in the last year, the Outer Worlds developer Obsidian Entertainment has hired the narrative designer of Outer Wilds, Kelsey Beecham. This is really cool. I haven't actually finished Outer Wilds. It's one of my backlog games that I hope to get to during this whole quarantine situation.
Same.
But everything I've heard praised about it is the environmental storytelling, the narrative elements, the time manipulation stuff. I kind of want to not get too much into it by accidentally spoiling it for somebody. But this to me shows that Obsidian is a pretty storied RPG developer, right? And for them to hire somebody off of an indie game like Outer Wilds, it's a great opportunity for Kelsey Beecham. It leads me to believe, I wonder if they're bringing them on to be the narrative designer, narrative lead for whatever their next project is, or a part of that at least, whether that's, the Outer Worlds 2, or if Microsoft has them, they give them full creative control, but if they're creating a different IP for Microsoft. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add to this. I just thought it was a neat little news story, especially considering people often misconstrue these two game titles for one another. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I was not impressed with the Outer Worlds. I was really excited about it. It seemed to make fun of capitalism in a haha, we're making fun of capitalism manner, and it didn't have any earnesty to it. So I mean, and I haven't finished the Outer Wilds, but yeah, like you said, I mean, a lot of people praise the story and the narrative. So having somebody with that pedigree coming on board, I think, is a good thing, because, like I said, I wasn't really impressed with the Outer Worlds narrative and the way they handled their themes. So
I think that whole game, for better or worse, spoke its budget. You know what I mean? Because it was published by Private Division. This deal was done before Microsoft acquired them. Yeah. And I think that game was full of so much potential. I enjoyed the game probably more than you did, but I didn't think it was it wasn't my game of the year by any means. It wasn't 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. It was a good game. But I kind of went in with expectations as to, this is a polished indie title. You know what I mean? And I don't know if some people went into it thinking it's this is Fallout level quality I'm going to be getting,
Yeah, I think I was more on the Fallout side of it, just because, I mean, they were the original makers of Fallout, and it seemed like they had the budget behind them, and the whole satire on capitalism I thought was a really cool concept for a Fallout game, because Fallout does a lot of stuff with democracy and stuff like that, and war and politics, so attacking an economic system I thought was an interesting choice and could lead to some cool storytelling, but it didn't.
Have you had a chance to see the No Clip documentary yet on the Outer
have
Worlds?
Not. No,
so
I have not.
In the first part, it's actually pretty interesting because they talk about a large part of this game was cut. There was an entire side member that was cut from it. They even talk about the developers of, one of the biggest complaints lifted at this game was the ending kind of comes out of nowhere, right? It's the ending is here. And I agree with that sentiment. And they talk about how there was a lot of story beats in the game that they just kind of had to remove, and that led to the product being worse off for it. They're more self-aware than I thought they would be in that documentary in terms of talking about the development process. And I think that paints a different picture in my head because of the information they provided, but I think you're on with a lot of your criticisms.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they are that honest with it this shortly after release, because you see a lot of companies are kind of cagey for a while. But I mean, that game came out 8 months ago. Yeah, 6 months ago. So it's interesting that they were able to Danny and NoClip were able to sit down and have that conversation and actually have an earnest talk with the problems and like the developers being honest, because a lot of them for a while like they'll stand by their game and the choices that they made. So it's refreshing to see that.
Well, I think too, being a developer that had like now has the backing of Microsoft, and this game wasn't in touch with Microsoft at all, and it was private division. It's like they feel a little bit more freedom, because if that partnership goes away, that partnership probably won't exist moving forward anyways,
Mm-hmm.
So they can be a little bit more candid and honest. Who knows?
That's true.
Yeah. Next up, this is just a roundup of news that I'm going to throw all of them out there, and you guys can tell me if any of them are important to you or relevant, or if we should just move on, all right? So first up, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, the world's first Western JRPG title, is coming June 23rd. The Dark Pictures anthology has a loose summer release date now of summer 2020. Their second entry, Little Hope, is coming with a new launch date trailer, which is funny that they call it a launch date trailer and they just give us a launch window. I thought that was kind of odd. And then lastly, so Crysis Remastered. This was a game that popped up in like leaks, and then people weren't sure if it was confirmed. And then early this morning, Xbox posted a trailer with it. And it's coming soon to current gen consoles. No release date yet, except it's also coming to Nintendo Switch, which is really weird considering that this franchise is known for pushing the power of PCs. And it's coming to the Nintendo Switch. I love the Nintendo Switch, but Powerhouse it isn't,
So, on that one, I'll give a little detail. Normally I don't have these details on top of what you already have, Jared, but apparently the Switch port of that game is a port done by Saber.
Yep.
The people who did the Witcher 3 port to Switch, right? So
that makes sense.
Yeah, so a similar situation where the Witcher 3 is kind of known for pushing, the technical boundaries on PC. Also, using Saber Interactive to get their game out on Switch. So
yeah, and The Witcher, from what I've heard on Switch, is incredible. And like runs fairly well for running on essentially a handheld. So I mean, hey, good pull for Crytek to have them do it. Like, Blue Point's obviously not touching it, so you get the best you can for the Switch as far as porting it. So
hopefully that is because Blue Point is busy working on Demon Souls Remastered.
Or whatever they're rumored. Some people say like Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear, Splinter Cell, Siphon Filter. Like,
my hope, even though we know it's tied to Sony, my hope, Mass Effect. Obviously, it's not going to happen. So the thing
I wish too, but
if only, man. God, if only. The rehydrated SpongeBob game release date of June 23rd. That's interesting now that we live in a place where this is like, if it's able to hit this date, this might be one of the only summer games we get. We're all still assuming that Ghost of Tsushima gets delayed, right? Based on everything that's happened with Sony delaying Last of Us Part 2 and Iron Man VR. This game could do really well in that summer slot. We've seen Crash Bandicoot, the remakes come out in that time slot, and Spyro, and both do really well, especially now in a year where we don't know if there's going to be any releases to either side of it. I think that game can hit the NPD charts sneakily and sell really well, probably better than people assume for a remake of a remaster of a SpongeBob game.
THQ SpongeBob game.
Exactly, with their 900 games they have in development. Jesus.
I mean, I would be really curious if it even hits that date.
Yeah, it's we hadn't had a date before, so I wonder if it's one of those things where they're bug squashing right now, and it's like, well, that's the date. We'll just because that's a game that doesn't really live or die by retail, I'd assume, and I think THQ is one of those publishers that we've seen that they're strong risk takers, and maybe they're just down for an all digital release, and they kind of put the retail stuff on the back burner until it's more viable. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I know like that has like a collector's edition and everything.
Oh yeah, that's right. It has like a $300 one and a $150 one.
Like it's a pretty substantial collection for, once again, a THQ SpongeBob game from the PlayStation 2 era. So that I feel like they wouldn't want to release that unless that's 100% ready and they can get it in the hands of people who pre-ordered it. So I don't know. Maybe it is coming, but it feels. I'm not holding my breath for anything at this point. I'm like The Last of Us got delayed. All right, cool. Like, shocking. Iron Man VR, I don't have VR, wasn't going to play it anyway. Ghost of Tsushima, I honestly think might still hit that date just because it's not going to need the production, like the number of copies made that The Last of Us was going to need. They could do a limited release with that. Once again, the collector's edition, that makes it tricky because that collector's edition was pretty expensive too, or expensive, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, I'm not holding my breath that any games come out for a while, and I'm okay with that.
I think the two, and this is out of left field on a tangent, but I think the two games that are highly anticipated for me that could hit because they're only going to be released digitally are the Cuphead DLC that's kind of been in the cooker for a while. Not saying it would, but there's a possibility because it's more solely focused on digital, and Silksong, the follow-up to Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
Because they don't rely on physical releases. And a lot of times in the case of Moon Studios, who did the Ori games, they're 3 different people who work across the globe anyways, so their workflow wasn't as drastically affected as other people. Obviously, it was affected in some capacity. So it's going to be a time where these smaller indie devs that are kind of used to this workflow can have some type of success depending on when they release, because they're more likely to be able to get out the door than these AAA titles that need the retail backing, that need the special editions and
the marketing push and all that. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, on that, real quick on that note, I think my most anticipated game that's still likely to come out is, it doesn't have a release date yet, but Kit Fox's Boyfriend Dungeon.
Oh yeah, that game looks rad.
I played it at PAX East last year. It's incredible. I cannot wait to play that game, and now that a lot of things are getting delayed, I'm gonna have time. And like, I travel a lot for my day job, so I'm home. Like, I was supposed to be on like a nationwide tour right now, and I'm home. So yeah, it's kind of nice. I have a lot of free time. So
you said Fox. That reminds me of, you guys know that indie game with the fox, that Tunic, the Zelda-like. That game could possibly hit this year too. That game has incredible art style.
Where is that?
Who knows, man? That thing's been, speaking of PAX, the thing's been at every PAX for like 3 years. It's one person developing it, I believe, which is incredible.
That's where it is.
Yeah. Next up, now that we've got the SpongeBob news out of the way, so according to VGC, which is Video Game Chronicles, and it's been corroborated by other sources in the industry, a Resident Evil 4 remake is currently in development, slated for release in 2022. It's being developed by M2, which is comprised of former Platinum and Capcom developers, with support from Capcom and blessings from series creator Shinji Mikami. Apparently he was approached to lead the project and he kind of turned it down, but he's like, yeah, go for it, do it. It sounds like a good idea, but I don't want to be a part of it. Which I wonder if he's maybe working on Evil Within 3 or working on other projects maybe. I don't know if it was, no, I don't want to touch that, or if he was already busy with the current, promise to a project. Who knows? So I'll say this. I'm not a huge Resident Evil guy in terms of, I don't have a history with the series, Andrew. I'm kind of getting into now with the remakes, right, with 2 and 3. Yeah. I am somebody who went and tried to go play the Resident Evil 1 remaster and Resident Evil 4. And to me, and I know this is going to sound blasphemous because, people love those games. As somebody who didn't play those growing up and when they came out, I personally don't feel that they hold up really well. 1 more so than 4. I think 4 holds up a little bit better. The tank controls are difficult. People make this argument that, like, why are you complaining about Resident Evil 4 where you have to stop and shoot people when you kind of already do that in the remakes of the the modern versions of those games? I think it's just different. I think phrasing it that way is like, oh, it sounds like you're doing exactly the same thing, whereas it's not the case. You're slightly moving in these newer games and you're shooting. I wouldn't say I ever dead stop like you have to in RE4. I'm down for this remake. I know the internet's kind of divided on it because they wanted Code Veronica, because that's linearly the next game in the series that should be. But the truth of the matter is that this is about sales, and Capcom wants to get that money from an RE4 remake. They're not going to necessarily get that type of
If you look at Capcom, they've had a wild last decade. Resident Evil 6, not great. Monster Hunter never hit a worldwide audience for a long time. And Devil May Cry, or DMC, the reboot, not great. Not many people liked it, but like up until this year, the last 3 years, they've had Game of the Year contenders.
Yep.
And last year they had 2 Game of the Year contenders. Capcom has like risen from the ashes in like the best way to me. I'm still working through Resident Evil 7. I just bought it recently because I've been a big scaredy cat.
Understandable.
Resident Evil 2 last year was my favorite game from last year, hands down.
Cool.
And Devil May Cry 5 was fine. Like, I'm not a huge Devil May Cry fan. And then they had Monster Hunter in between in 2018. So for them to take next year off is interesting. It makes me wonder what their like big tentpole game is, because they've had one every year for the last few years.
Remember, we've talked about this on our podcast weeks ago. There's that other rumor that RE8 is hitting next year with the werewolves and all that stuff.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so here's the thing though: is turning RE into a yearly franchise a good idea?
If they differentiate themselves, right, it could be, because 7 and 8, based on the rumors with 8, it's going to be first person. Apparently, it's taking a lot of departures from the RE formula, which they're kind of worried about might alienate fans. But if you're also giving them their, RE goodness with the remix of the classics, and it feels like classic Resident Evil, I think you can have your cake and eat it too, if those games end up being more like RE2 Remake and RE7 and not like RE3 Remake, in the sense where people feel it doesn't hit the quality benchmark that those other 2 did. Still a good game, but not to that level. Yeah. Good question.
I think that's fair. And I think that's a really good point, because like it's not like an Assassin's Creed situation where it's the same gameplay every year and it's just a new game every year. Feeding people these remakes is a good way to break it up, but also still retain revenue. I am a little bummed they're not doing Code Veronica, because it's like I think the least accessible one outside of maybe RE0. So yeah, I mean, I'm bummed they're not doing Code Veronica too, especially because it was canonically not canonically, but like during development it was supposed to be RE3, because they were developed at the same time. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious to see what they do. I'm stoked for RE4 remake though.
Yeah, Dom?
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm with you though, Jared, on RE4. I tried to go back to it a few months ago now, and it was kind of like, maybe this was last week you and I talked about it, but yeah, I was like, it's hard to shoot, and yeah, you have to stop. I don't want to go through this all again. It was cool when it first came out, and I loved it, back on like GameCube, but yeah, I'm down for them to remake this one. Having never played Code Veronica, I'm not. I can only hear people say like that would have been the better option for the next remake, but I don't know. To me, it doesn't really matter, I guess.
I think part of it is just like people. I'm sorry about that. I think you broke up for a second.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think part of it is just people are worried about RE4 because it is so treasured, and just doing a remake is scary for people.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I get. I personally like RE4 a lot. I would have liked to see Code Veronica, because it is more, from what I understand, more similar tonally to RE2 than RE3 and RE4, which are a little bit more action heavy, and less horror, which is what I loved about RE2. So I would have liked to see Code Veronica for that reason. What they could do, which would be great, is they teased Project Resistance before they announced RE3, and like that was going to be the next Resident Evil game, and then they're like, oh, no, it's being bundled with RE3. If they just drop Code Veronica and 4 at the same time, cool. I don't think they will, but that'd be ideal.
It would have been cool if Code Veronica maybe came with 3, because 3 is the one that they talk about having the shorter campaign, and it kind of needs something else to satiate the $60 purchase point. Yeah. And from what I've heard from 4, no one complains about 4 being too short or lacking of content. But that would be dope if it was a package deal or like a pre-order. I mean, I don't want it to be a pre-order bonus, but if that's how they want to justify it, that'd be dope too.
I think for the most part, we've kind of moved away from pre-order bonus bundles. The last one I can think of is the South Park games, like looping in another game with a pre-order bundle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the last one I remember.
Yeah, and so I think Dishonored did that 2, but I don't know if that was before or after South Park.
Well, but Dishonored had the definitive edition come out, and then they're like, oh, if you buy 2, you also get a free copy of 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I remember getting Dishonored 2 for Christmas. I already had Dishonored 1, so I gave my friend the code. So yeah, like that's I think that's a little bit different.
Call of Duty came with Modern Warfare Remastered, right?
That is true. I forgot about that. But did that come out standalone at the same time?
No. It came out
Eventually
like
it
6
did.
months later, standalone.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm not a Call of Duty person, so yeah, that makes sense why I forgot that one.
Man, so it was a remaster of my favorite Call of Duty game of all time, and it was attached to a game I had no interest in buying. So I was like, oh, great,
So you bought
cool.
it?
No, I didn't.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, and I still haven't played it. Yeah.
Good for you.
Our guest last week was a guy named Tanner Pierce from DualShockers.
Yeah,
and he's a big Call of Duty guy, and we were talking about it because he was reviewing the recently released Modern Warfare 2 campaign remaster that was exclusive on PS4 for a month, which that's a whole conversation in of itself. But yeah, we were talking about that, and it's a shame that I haven't gone to play it yet. It's just like I ditched it from my mind for those 6 months. Then by the time it came out, as a video game player, there's something already else I'm interested in, so I don't have time to go back and do that, and then it just kind of slipped. So never got to it.
We're kind of forced, and like as people who play video games, to have like goldfish memory, because something new is always coming out. So it's just like, oh, next shiny object constantly. So I totally get it. Like I'm the same way.
Well, it's even worse when you host a podcast or work at a game site or do anything like that, because it's part of you doing your best at what you're doing to be informed with the current games. You know what I mean? So it's next up, Gamescom 2020 will be a digital event this year, according to the press release from Gamescom themselves. Go ahead and check out their Twitter. They have the full press release there. I don't want to read it all verbatim on the podcast, but the short of it is that they're instead of doing their public stuff, they're doing a digital replacement. They were kind of open to the idea of still doing something public related, but the German government kind of put their foot down and forced this decision. It seems like it was kind of out of their hands at this point. The curious thing to me is, if you guys remember, Jeff Keighley did Games Night Live, or Gamescom opening night. I forgot what the actual title of it was.
I think it was opening night. I think that was
opening night. Yeah, and he kind of introduced the event, and it was kind of like his own little press conference thing. He had developers come out and show new games. Do you guys think that their digital event will be Jeff Keighley produced? Do you think like that's a smart decision of, we've been working with Jeff Keighley now. He was already going to do something this year again. If you're going to do a digital event, have the guy who's most known for it, right? Who throws Game Awards. Like how likely do you think this is a Jeff Keighley joint, Gamescom digital?
I don't think it's Jeff Keighley at all.
Oh, you don't?
No, not at all. I mean, because Gamescom's Germany, right?
Yeah,
it's in Germany. Yeah, I mean, I don't foresee him putting in the time to make a digital event, because that also takes a lot of work. Like I work in the events industry, and digital events are also very hard. And with Gamescom being later in the year, closer to Game Awards, he's going to have to be figuring out what he's doing with Game Awards and like creating all the assets and content for that. Why would he not waste his time, but why would he spend his time working on a show that's not his when he has so many logistics to start figuring out very quickly?
Yeah, so. I mean, the paycheck could be huge. That's
yeah,
a good motivator. I don't know if that's
true.
That's worth it to Jeff, though. I don't know if it seems like he's pretty well off. I don't know if he, that drives him a big paycheck.
Yeah. And I mean, how big of a paycheck is Gamescom going to be able to dish him? Especially like, are they monetizing tickets, or are they live streaming on Twitch? If they're live streaming on Twitch for free, then how many sponsors do they have? How much are those sponsors paying? Like, you're looking at a huge revenue change for Gamescom as like from an event standpoint. And so how much money are they really going to have to throw at somebody like Jeff Keighley, who can make this money elsewhere on his own thing?
I guess I think for me, my idea is like, at the worst, I think he could host it, or at least parts of it. A full-on production, you make a lot of valid points of like, it's a lot on his plate, especially because, like you said, Gamescom happens so much later in the year, closer to the Game Awards, and that's his primary focus, right? That's his baby. Yeah, what do you think, Dom? Are you with Andrew that it's probably not likely that it's a production by Jeff Keighley?
Yeah, I kind of feel that vibe that he's just taking a break. Like, not gonna put in the effort for this. I don't know.
Yeah.
He already divorced E3. You know, how much more can the man do?
Yeah. Man. Everyone did this year, and then E3 divorced itself from the world.
Exactly.
So
It's going to be interesting with all these digital events. I think I have the most faith in the big boys like Microsoft and Nintendo because they can afford to do whatever the hell they want and they can, make it work. It's the smaller ones I'm more interested in to see how it goes. Like IGN Summer Gaming, I think IGN's production stuff will be solid. I just don't know how the independent publishers are going to handle their own packages for it. And then obviously we don't know what Sony's doing specifically. And at Gamescom, they've never really done anything digital in the past, right? It's just been the opening night and then it's all a public show floor event.
yeah, from what I remember, yeah.
So that's gonna. I don't know if maybe they look for, if they can't get Keighley, if they look for somebody else with that experience to help shepherd it along. Who knows? Lastly, I wanted to touch on this Cyberpunk 2077 stuff. A limited edition Xbox One controller got leaked online via Amazon, as most things have been lately. And today, the day of recording this, we're recording on April 16th. Xbox's website itself did the thing it did at E3 last year where it kind of got overtaken and hacked by Cyberpunk 2077, and it's teasing a reveal for April 20th, 420, just Blaze. And
Jesus.
it seems like there's some other leaked images pointing towards a custom console with the controller along with it. Those haven't been verified. The controller has. Both of you had a chance to check out the controller. I think I sent it to you, Dom, and Andrew.
Yeah.
I think you had a chance to check it out as well, right?
Yeah, I saw it.
I personally really enjoy it. I actually am thinking of ordering it, not opening it until Cyberpunk comes out because it's one of my most anticipated games. Hopefully it comes out this year. But I'm thinking about pre-ordering the controller and saving it to play with the game when it comes out. I personally really like it. We had a discussion last week about the DualSense controller and how the dual tone coloring of it for me didn't really work. And with this controller, I think it's a neat design that makes the dual tone stuff work with the silver and the black. I like that it feels very much in World 2 Cyberpunk, or it feels like two separate controllers just like mashed together. I don't know. The design just works for me. I like the engraving on it too. Did you guys like this controller at all, or is it just like, it's cool, but it's not, not for me?
This was another one, and it happens often with these types of consoles and controllers, that it's just a little too much,
Yeah, I get that.
It obviously reflects the game and the art style and stuff very well, but it's just a little much. Like, I think the Gears of War ones were often just a little too much, but again, it reflects the game perfectly. I like the more subtle kinds. The Spider-Man controller in console was really cool. Because it was all red and had a logo on it, but it was just red and white, and it was a little simpler. But yeah, this definitely is a super cyberpunk ass looking controller, so it's cool. It's definitely cool from that point of view. But my personal taste, I'm like, that's a little much.
Yeah,
I'm in the same boat as Dom. Like, I don't care for busy things. I don't care for. I think the Gears of War controller and Xbox I wasn't a fan of. The Spider-Man PS4 is really cool. But yeah, it just was too loud and for me. It's not my style. I really like the PS4 controller colors they did like a couple of years ago, like the orange and blue, the green and white. Like my wife has the rose gold one. Like, I like those colors because they're simple. They're not abrasive. It didn't work for me. I'm also like not mega stoked on Cyberpunk. Like, I'm passively interested in it. I'm not. It's not my most anticipated game of the year. I actually don't even know what is at this point because it's been such a weird year. So yeah, I think that's also just like why it's not my cup of tea. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cool thing though with like Xbox specifically is the design lab, right? So if you don't like any of the controllers they're putting out, you can just design your own. We've talked about it on this podcast, like Sony should do that already. Like, let us create our own. Well, now DualSense controllers. Let us pay however much to customize them. I like it. From what I've heard from people, a lot of people tend to are okay with the console being busy, but they want their controllers to be plain. where I'm opposite, where I kind of just want my console to be like a black, piece of electronics, and I like my controller being weird, just because it's like I don't really pay attention to looking at my controller really, when I'm playing, and I do think they're nice little like novelty items. I can see how it's too busy though. I just saw it and I was like, oh, that looks. To me, it feels like it's in world. I think it works that way as a design. It feels like something that could exist in Cyberpunk, but
man, the one exception to what I was saying would be there was an Xbox 360 that was Star Wars themed. I don't even remember what the game was.
Oh, the Darth Vader one?
No, it was the console. The R2D2 console, but then the controller
that one's cool.
was just metallic gold, like C-3PO. That was sweet.
It was the Kinect. I think it was the Kinect Star Wars game.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is a weird pairing because that game is hot garbage.
My least favorite one is I don't know if you guys remember the Battlefield one that's like a gross brown green.
That was gross.
Yeah.
Ugh. I like my controllers to be plain just because I don't have like a game space. It's just in my living room. So just being able to have the controller on the stand, or not on the stand, but like on my coffee table or like on an end table, it's not loud. It's not, abrasive. It kind of just blends in like, oh, that's just a normal gaming controller. Totally fine. Whereas like if it was, neon yellow or an orange or whatever, it stands out more. So yeah, I just like mine to kind of blend in a little bit more to the surroundings. So I'm one of those people opposite of you who I like loud consoles because it sits in my entertainment system, and I like quiet controllers. So,
Andrew, are you more of a PlayStation guy? Like, where you fall at on the whole gaming thing? What's your preferred platform?
But preferred probably PlayStation. No, definitely PlayStation. Definitely PlayStation.
Probably.
I got an Xbox on Black Friday for like $100. I got one of the all digital ones.
Oh, cool.
So I've been playing that, but I mostly play on PlayStation. And then like I love my Switch a whole lot, but yeah.
Nice. I just want to know, going into this our big topic, where you fall on that for context for people.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't know, Dom's more of a PlayStation guy, though he has the consoles. I'm more of an Xbox guy, and I have all the consoles.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're pretty agnostic, but we have our preferred platforms, obviously. Nice. Bloomberg's PS5 report.
Put your sparring gloves on and your helmet, because we're about to just fanboy fight this out.
Jesus Christ, fanboys. So Bloomberg's PS5 report kind of came out of nowhere this morning. Kind of caught me by surprise. I don't know if it did you guys as well. I don't know if anybody expected to read this. Bloomberg is a pretty trusted source for these types of things. So when they post a report about something, it's kind of not necessarily taken as fact, but it's pretty substantiated. So I wanted to get into this. This is via Bloomberg.com. Just to let you know, too, apparently I have one more visit to read an article for free. Didn't know that was a thing on their site, but when I went to go read it, it popped up and it's like, hey, you want to subscribe? I'm like, no. So Bloomberg revealed a report titled "Sony is said to limit PlayStation 5 output in first year." And the article by Takashi Mochizuki and Yuki Furukawa revealed the following. So I have some bullet points here. I'm going to go through them. And at the end of it, we'll kind of tackle, if something shoots out at you right away or you want to talk about something specifically, let me know, and we can tackle that right away. A lot of interesting information here in regards to the release of the PlayStation 5. So, first up, Sony plans to make 5 to 6 million PlayStation 5s by March 2021. Considering they told assembly partners exactly that. So they basically went to their assembly partners who are manufacturing the consoles and told them that, they're looking to make 5 to 6 million consoles, PlayStation 5s, by the end of their fiscal year. And for comparison, they sold 7.5 million PS4 units in the first 2 quarters of its launch. So we're looking at a really small, in comparison, a launch amount for the PlayStation 5. Do you guys think this is surprising at all? I guess we'll get into the reasoning later, but hearing those numbers just by themselves, does that worry you, or do you assume that because of COVID-19 and everything going on, that it wasn't going to be the launch that, last gen had.
Yeah, it seems like it's to meet demand, right? Because you don't want to, especially when the consoles are most expensive, at the beginning of their life, you don't want to make too many at the high price, especially if there's not going to be demand for them, given, the current situation and then probably the lasting economic, recession or whatever it ends up looking like. Probably people aren't going to be buying as many consoles this fall as they were fall of 2013 or 14, whenever PS4 came out. Plus, this one is, you'll get to it later, but probably more expensive than PS4 was too. So,
yeah.
This doesn't really surprise me because Nintendo Switch, when it launched, was 3 million worldwide at launch. So, and they had a shortage for a while. I mean, there were people who at one point they sold more copies of Breath of the Wild than they did Switches.
Yep.
Because people were buying it because they couldn't find Switches, but they wanted to make sure they could play the new Zelda game. So yeah, this isn't surprising, I don't think. I think it's more, it's Sony being conservative with their expectations, especially because of everything going on with COVID. Like, I'm really convinced we were supposed to already have the PS5 reveal. And I think Xbox was going to have a big blowout at E3 which would have been in like a month in a couple weeks. So yeah, I think they're both kind of trepidatious right now and kind of, walking very carefully and setting their expectations as best they can.
And yeah, I think the scarcity isn't as crazy as kind of limiting your release to certain Jesus, I'm having a brain fart. Regions.
Yeah.
So like, not launching in specific territories around the world because you have limited quantity. I think the safer bet there is to limit the quantities in every territory but have a worldwide launch. Recently in the Unlocked interview Phil Spencer did with Ryan McCaffrey at IGN, Phil Spencer talked about how not releasing day and date in Japan with the Xbox One severely hurt their already limited reach they had in that country. So, not being able to launch worldwide at the same time will hurt these new consoles. And I think, providing scarcity and kind of being conservative with the total amount as opposed to cutting out an entire country or territory from getting them at launch is a smarter move there. Next up, production capacity isn't the main factor in shortage. So, people were wondering, is the reason they're not doing this because they can't assemble as many PS5s? But rather Sony's expected demand alongside projected price and post-pandemic economy. Both of you guys kind of touched on this. We're sitting in a place where we don't know what spending is going to look like for consumers after this whole thing is done or as it begins to return to some type of normalcy. And Dom, you specifically mentioned the price, which we'll get to, that is going to be more expensive than last-gen consoles, we assume anyways. So,
man, and you know what? This sounds shitty, but I think they would be wise, and maybe it's just not possible at this point because they didn't plan for it, but to, in the next few weeks here, get pre-orders available, at least in the U.S., where most people have just been, provided a nice check from the government. And many of
I don't know how that would play though, man.
Yeah.
I get your understanding. Like, I don't know how that would play if you come in and be like, hey, everybody just got your relief to pay your rent, order our console. Like, I get you thinking there, but it's like,
I don't say it.
Yeah, I don't think you could say it.
Well, obviously, yes, I know, but that's how I think a lot of people would read it, though. Is obviously not saying that outright, but it's like, you're saying this now because people, not everyone, I think a lot of people are going to be using these checks very seriously, but there is a good portion of the country that this is going to be expendable income to some extent, and yeah, from a business perspective, you want to take advantage of that, but it's very weird. Like, it would behoove them, I guess, to some extent, but it could backfire. I don't know. Who knows?
I mean, they've also got to figure out exactly how many they're delegating to each territory, and that requires market research, which right now is weird because of the economies and all over the world with the COVID situation. So, I mean, they've got a lot of stuff that they've kind of got to pivot on really quickly and get their research done on how many they need to ship, so then they can open up pre-orders based on how many they can get to each retailer, because if they can't deliver to the retailer how many they said they could, that screws over the retailer and hurts the relationships with that retailer.
And then the pricing chicken, right, between the two companies of like who goes first with their pricing.
Yeah. I mean, and
there's a lot.
At one point, one of them has to budge. And they both have their price set. They're just worried what the other one is going to do and the order in which they announce them.
And to that same interview, Phil Spencer candidly said, like, hey, we're flexible on our price, and I have the backing of Satya Nadella. For those who don't know, he's the main dude in charge at Microsoft. Yeah. And the way Phil spoke about it, I think they have their set price, but they want to go second because they're willing to undercut or match. I don't think they're going to move if they don't have to, but I do think they're flexible enough that they can if they need to.
I mean, the thing is, too, is like, I think Xbox is trying to learn from what happened last time with launch. I mean, this current generation launch for Xbox was an absolute nightmare.
Yep.
Every single thing that they did was wrong. I mean, they went all in on the entertainment system. It was $100 more. They had the no use copies DRM built in, and they backpedaled on 2 of those 3 things. They couldn't justify backpedaling on the price until later, and they got taken to school. They got their lunch,
and it was less powerful.
Eaten. Yeah, exactly. It was less powerful, and it didn't have a lineup at launch. So yeah, I mean, they had Rise, Son of Rome, and like Zoo Tycoon, and that was it.
Well, that's the tough thing too. Is like PlayStation 4 didn't really have a launch title either, but they didn't need to because the rest of their messaging killed. You know what I mean? Handing the game to a friend and everything. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you've got third-party games, but I mean, like even within the launch window, I mean, they had Infamous Second Son, they had Killzone within 6 months. Ooh, like I can't think of anything that Microsoft put out within
Quantum
6
Break?
months. Well, I thought that was a full year after, because that was in the fall.
It might be.
It?
I'm just throwing out things that could possibly.
Yeah, no, and like, and like even that was critically kind of panned, like, or it was pretty average. Sure. Yeah, and so like, yeah, I mean, Xbox is definitely learning from the mistakes, which is good to see. But they need to Dem and Sony both need to get their messaging out on what these systems are and what they attend. I mean, Microsoft's been better about it for sure than Sony has. I mean, they announced their system 2 full years essentially before it came out, when they did the Project Scarlet drop. We all knew it was coming, but still, it's been weird. I feel like I said, I feel like Sony would have already had their big announcement if this COVID stuff wouldn't have happened.
Well, and just handling the current like modern age of how to unveil a console, I think Xbox nailed it by handing the console to Digital Foundry and Austin Evans. They're like, here, take it apart, do videos on it, because we know that's what works in today's day and age, right, with social media and content creation. And it killed, and it worked well, because those are people that, you know, a large online audience trusts to give them the rundown, and they did that. And there's rumors and murmurs that PlayStation was planning something similar during or before the Mark Cerny GDC TED Talk that he gave. And it could have been, byproduct of this whole thing happening and them not being able to do it, but who knows. The next bullet point, developers expect the console to cost $499 to $550, and Sony has struggled with its price setting decision due to the scarcity of components. This is interesting. The $500 price point is what we've assumed, Andrew, on the podcast, of both of them will probably be $500 because that's just the type of consoles they are. The $550 thing is odd. I'm of the opinion that I don't think a console will ever release at a $50 interval. I just don't think that makes sense. I don't know if that would work necessarily. It just seems odd to me, and maybe that's just like an old world way of thinking. I don't know. Do you guys think that a console would release at a $50 price point, interval?
Yeah, it just feels weird unless it's a second SKU, right? It feels weird to have something at 50, but then at the same time, it's like, why? I'm sure there's some marketing psychology behind that, but
yeah,
why not?
Yeah. I don't see why not. Like, it is what it is. It's $50. Mommy and daddy at Christmas time are gonna cough over the extra $50 for little Timmy. It is what it is.
It's just tough though, right? Because if the console costs $500, you're likely buying at least one game, so it's already going to be essentially $600. So if you put it at like a $50 price point, then it's like, oh god, now you're dipping over that.
Yeah,
but why not? You have the right point. It's like get an extra $50. Why not?
Well, and like the thing is too is especially with this generation that we haven't seen the last. No, I guess just this last generation is we have the backwards compatibility function. I mean, Xbox has gone very deep in on that and been very committed to it, which I think is great. Sony has said, hey, like pretty much everything at launch is going to work, or at least a lot is going to work at launch. So, I mean, you're going to have games still. I mean, games are still going to come out this fall that are going to be for last gen, but you can play them on the new gen. Cyberpunk, for example, is a big deal. I mean, CD Projekt Red came out and said, like, no matter where you buy it, you're going to have the best version, no matter what system you play it on. So people are going to buy Cyberpunk when Cyberpunk launches, and then they're going to buy an Xbox Series X. I almost called it the One X because the naming convention is terrible. But yeah, people are going to buy the Series X, and they're going to play the same games they've been playing. I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, the only game we have confirmed for launch is Godfall for PS5.
Yeah.
That's it.
Off the top of my head, I think that's it, yeah.
Halo Infinite's being like tossed around, but I think Microsoft is going to want that install base before they put out literally their biggest title.
It's confirmed. That's coming out day and date with the console.
Is it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
As it sits, they've doubled down saying it's coming out day and date. Who knows if that moves? Because even going back to that interview once again, because it was really insightful. Phil Spencer talked about this thing that it was pretty interesting, that in previous generations, the way console launches work is there's like 6 to 8 games or even more than that come out at launch, right? And then there's usually like a 1 to 2 month window of like nothing new coming out on that console, right? In terms of major releases. And he said that they're possibly eyeing an approach where they have 1 or 2 major releases at launch, maybe even 1, but then they stagger them out. So Xbox might not have a traditional launch lineup as we've seen, where it's like these 6 to 8 games come out on day 1. From what Phil was saying, it might be Halo Infinite comes out on day 1, and then this is just an example. Don't take it, Assassin's Creed Ragnarok comes out a month later, right? And then Grounded, obviously that's coming out beforehand, but just another example, that comes out a month later. Like this weird staggered release to keep momentum going. He talked about that, which is odd, and I don't know if that is going to be their game plan of, no, we want like a major thing hitting every 2 to 3 months because we want to keep momentum.
But the thing is that odd? Because that's exactly what the Switch did.
No, I'm saying odd in the sense of the PlayStation and Microsoft.
Oh, okay,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's smart. It's just a different approach for them that we haven't seen those two big boys willing to commit to. And to your point, yeah, it did work for Switch. It had Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8, Deluxe, Splatoon 2, and then into Super Mario Odyssey.
And Super Mario Odyssey, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I mean, didn't Microsoft also say they weren't having any Series X exclusives, though?
Yeah, for launch? The first 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, Godfall is confirmed as a PS5 game.
Yep.
I see what you're saying.
Whereas it's not cross-generation. Whereas Xbox hasn't come out and said we're not going to have any. So even if Halo Infinite launches on day and date with the system, it's not a certified like Series X game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, though. Is like with Cyberpunk, and this is part of the point of like Sony needs to get their messaging clear so people don't have these conversations. But we assume that there's going to be some type of smart delivery system on PlayStation. That's not confirmed at all. There was also that thing that came out that Cyberpunk 2077 has a separate SKU for PS5. What does that mean? Like, it could mean literally nothing. Or is it that you have to pay twice for that game? You know what I mean? Because Sony hasn't messaged that, like, yo, we have smart delivery too, our own title for it. I would assume that's the case. I don't think they're not going to have that. It'd be really detrimental if they didn't. So then there's that category there of like, well, if almost everything third party is going to be cross-generational, and Godfall, like, how important is Godfall as just a next gen exclusive? Like, how does that all play? It's weird.
I honestly think that PlayStation 5 will not have a smart delivery system.
You think it won't?
No, I don't, because something like a smart delivery system needs a lot of infrastructure built around it. The system kind of needs to be an idea when you're developing the system. It's not something you can just react to. And Sony has, even the PS4 era, has had a very, very old school way of thinking. So going back to the PS3, 360 launched with achievements. and PS3 or Sony was like, hey, that's a great idea, and implemented trophies like 2 years later, I think, when MGS4 came out, and that was their response. And then jump to PS4, Sony buys Gaikai to make PS Now, not considering that the infrastructure of the internet in America is absolute garbage, yeah. And no one can use it, and it's overly expensive. And then Xbox comes out and is like, Game Pass. It's PlayStation Now, but it works. So like Sony has always tried to innovate but has never made that step. I mean, and even like looking at changing your PSN name, like that's developed on the back end when you're first developing your online infrastructure. Steam has had it for forever. Xbox has had it for forever because they thought about it beforehand. Sony never did when developing the PSN. And they finally figured it out over a decade later. So they're not going to be able to pivot to all of a sudden have smart delivery on a system unless they were thinking about it way beforehand, where Xbox obviously was.
Yeah, my only vote of confidence on that is because they've basically been doing it between PS4 and PS4 Pro, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like my only chunk of confidence that they'll do the same thing for the games that come out on both 4 and 5 that would work the same.
The only difference there though is that's from like an engineering software side of them boosting it, whereas having a brand new console gives people the opportunity to have a separate SKU, right? So it's like it's different there, where it's like one's just an update, whereas the other one there is the ability to have a separate SKU because there weren't just PlayStation 4 Pro games, that only worked on that system, whereas that is going to be the case for PS5, where there is going to be games that only work on it. That's why smart delivery makes more sense for Xbox, because we know there's not going to be console exclusives for the first 2 years. So it makes sense that they were thinking about that in advance, right? And even with the backwards compatibility stuff, I think PlayStation fans need to understand it's going to be a process as well. People think the Xbox backwards compatibility happened overnight. It was a process over years, right? Mm-hmm. Where they would update with new lists of games that were available through the service.
They're
and
still
I think
doing
people
that.
need. Exactly. And I think people need to understand that with PlayStation, it's going to be the same thing. There's going to be probably a good portion of games, hopefully more than the 100 top played, so you just don't have Fortnite and Warframe at launch. But it's going to be updates over time to build that library. I hope people don't think it's going to be like, oh, all of them are going to be available at launch, because that's just not viable. You know what I mean? It's not possible.
Yeah. I mean, they said right now, I think they said close to 100 is ready to go, and by the time launch, I think they said close to 200 are going to be. They want to have around 200 ready to go.
That whole messaging, man, was a nightmare for the internet.
It was weird, but like if you just sit down and like think about what they're talking about, you can kind of piece it together. It wasn't well done, but I think we made it overly complicated, just because the messaging wasn't mega clear.
Well, that's a weird thing. It's one of those things where you watch, like I watched it, understood it, then I went to Twitter and everyone was like, "I'm confused. What is this? What is this?" And it was one of those things of I do think people over exaggerated how confusing it was, but then again, from Sony's perspective, it's like, well, you could have done it an easier way. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get through these. We're running kind of long, and I definitely want to hear what we've been playing. So I'm gonna get through these closing points, and then we're gonna talk about our final feelings on this whole Bloomberg report. So, Sony might forego a public press conference to announce price and release date due to COVID-19, which drastically upended their promotional plans. Andrew, you touched on that earlier, but I kind of jumbled up all of their plans for the year. According to those informed on the matter, Sony was forced to reveal its PS5 DualSense controller in a hurried fashion, likely fearing uncontrollable leaks. So the controller is in a lot of developers' hands because they're working on games for the platform, whereas the console's look and design is kind of secretive still, and it seems like they were just worried that it was going to leak, so they kind of wanted to control their messaging. And like we previously stated, their promotional plans were thrown out of loop, so they kind of wanted to get ahead of that, which makes sense. Next up,
Sony's controller design on a Tuesday,
an hour before an Inside Xbox, where they already stated there's so weird.
Yeah.
And then the number one trending thing was Xbox controller because of the design change. Anyways, Sony is still committed to launching the PS5 in holiday 2020, but would delay if Microsoft were to delay its launch. Basically saying like, yo, we're good unless, they want to delay, then we're good to delay as well.
You don't want to be 6 months after the competition.
Exactly. Yep. And lastly, analysts predict that a close contest for attention could force both companies to sell their hardware at a significant loss. Personally, I think them both selling for 500 is already a significant loss. I doubt if it goes even lower than that. Any closing thoughts on this? I guess for me, it's interesting how conservative Sony's being, and I don't know. It's unclear if that's the right move yet. Obviously, I think erring on the side of caution is better than being too confident, but I wonder if they're overprotecting themselves. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think even with their plans being muddled by this whole situation, it would behoove them to get their messaging out as early as possible, because I do think those who are planning to get a console still have to plan, and I don't think having a price in anywhere after June would be smart given the situation. But that's just me. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this whole Bloomberg report?
I think Sony needs to come out swinging. I think they need to have a bombastic digital event. I think they need to get out and reveal not everything. They can hang on to the console design for a little bit, but I think they need to come out and have an E3 style conference and just do it, because Microsoft has been dropping these breadcrumbs for so long at this point that like it's getting frustrating, and like that sounds so entitled, like, oh, like tell us what's happening, but like what is happening? Like, what are you guys planning? Like, I've been putting $20 every paycheck aside for almost 6 months to be able to buy the PS5 at launch.
Oh yeah.
And so like I'm buying it. What am I buying? It's 6 months, 7 months till launch. If we're guessing it's a November launch, what am I buying? Like, what is this system? Like, we have so little information that they can't do the Microsoft route. They need to drop this info. They need to drop a bomb. Whereas if they had started this 6 months ago, they wouldn't have needed to.
Yeah, I'm looking. This is all like, yep, it all mostly makes sense, right? But yeah, I'm more looking forward to the games as a part of that bomb being dropped. Because, I mean, we know all the specs, right? I mean, we basically had it torn down, at least on paper, right? We didn't see it, but we know everything that's inside there, and we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to cost. It's just we don't know anything for, like you said earlier, we know Godfall, but that's it. Otherwise, a lot of assumptions, right? Yeah. About, like, Horizon Zero Dawn sequel, Assassin's Creed. There's a lot of assumptions, but, like, we don't know anything about games, really. For either console. So yeah, I'm especially ready to hear what Sony's got for games, because that's what they're best at. This past generation was like, their games are great. So that's what I want to hear most from them. But in the meantime, I think, Jared, you got a good point. Like, they can't wait too long. Like, if you're getting into June, I think June is probably your sweet spot, right? Where your E3 area would be. And then by then, I think hopefully the world is just feeling a bit more positive too, and economies are starting to ramp back up in certain ways. But in the meantime, it has been cool, because they've done they donated some amount of money. I don't remember the number.
10 million.
It's at least 10 million. Okay, so that's a decent chunk of change towards some COVID relief, whatever it was exactly.
It's like funding indie studios and like helping indie studios out.
Yeah, they did that indie studio. Yeah, I don't know the specifics, but there's these things like that. And then most recently, they gave away a couple video games to everyone, right? Even if you're not a PS Plus subscriber, which I'm like guaranteeing Xbox is going to do something similar to, just because everyone, like a lot of people are giving away content or like discounts on content, right? And that kind of thing. So I assume Xbox is going to do something cool like that coming up soon. But
I think that the thing too is there's obviously a dedicated hardcore base of PlayStation gamers who are going to buy the PS5 no matter what, obviously, right? Especially for the exclusives. I do think, though, people are underplaying the idea that there's a large portion of people, general gamers, who bought the PS4 because they heard it was the better console. And they're like, I want to get back into gaming. Which one's a good one to buy? Get the PS4, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at exclusive sales for games, even the best-selling console exclusives for PlayStation dwarf the actual number of PlayStation 4s sold, right? It's like 120 million PS4s, and I think the best-selling console exclusive is 20 million at most, right? I believe.
But there's that effect of the higher the number of consoles, it's more difficult to get a higher attach rate, right? Like that just
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a
What I'm
percentage
basically
game.
saying is that I think that Sony needs to also understand that though they've sold astronomically well this generation, if Xbox comes out, it's cheaper, it has Halo Infinite at launch, even if it isn't a console exclusive. Like, no offense to the developers of Godfall, but that definitely reads as a launch game, for better or worse, right?
It does.
Yeah, no offense to the developers there. It looks like it could be a cool time, but it's, it's a launch title. I do think that a lot of people could be swayed to pick up the cheaper console with the big blockbuster title if Sony isn't able to match that. And like, I'm fortunate enough that I might be able to actually buy both consoles at launch, and I probably will, depending, barring some weird thing, who knows with the current situation. But yeah, I just think that Sony needs to understand, like, it's good to be cautious, but you need to also prove why people need to buy your console in fall, not just because we made the PS4, now buy the PS5, So
yeah,
I just
they
think
will,
lose sight
right?
of that. You hope. I don't like Jim Ryan. We've said this. Like, I don't like him leading Sony or being the face of them. I just don't think he is the best person for the job, especially considering the messages he's had with crossplay with Minecraft and all these outdated opinions that he has. I think them losing Sean Layden and all of these faces that made PlayStation a lot more approachable is not good. And I kind of hope either Shuhei or Herman Hulst takes on that approach of being the face of PlayStation, because if it's Jim Ryan, man, good lord. Anyways, I think that's it for the news. Let's talk about what we've been playing. I won't go too long since we've ran a little long here. Same old. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Animal Crossing. I recently unlocked terraforming in Animal Crossing, so I've been going ham with that. I'm taking the creating like a city approach in a certain area with my villagers and my town square and my shops and everything, and then stuff around that is more wilderness vibes. A lot of work there with custom patterns and all that stuff. In terms of Final Fantasy VII Remake, my first time playing through any Final Fantasy VII game, let alone Final Fantasy VII. Really enjoying it. I'm only about 7 hours in. This is no spoilers. I'm about to head out on my second big mission with Tifa and Barrett.
Sector 5.
So it's like,
okay.
Yeah, like chapter 5 or 4, something like that. So not too far in.
Yep.
Really enjoying it. Character's great. Combat, I'm really enjoying. Before it came out, people were, comparing it to Kingdom Hearts 3, which I was kind of down on that game quite a bit, without getting into it. I think this is it's similar, but I think it's way better and completely different in a lot of ways. My biggest hurdle with this game is the disconnect of like, oh, these people are clearly the main characters in this world where everyone else looks like normal human beings. It's like they're running through and they're like, oh, Avalanche did this. I wonder who Avalanche is. It's like, maybe it's the dude with the gun arm and the other guy with the giant sword on his back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like hokey stuff that I'd expect from, an early days JRPG. I like that it's not turn-based anymore, though the combat is turn-based in a way where you often find yourself attacking, backing up, kind of assessing the situation, using your spells or items. So it is a weird, like, active turn-based system, to me anyways. That's how it reads. But I am really enjoying it. Like I said, it's my first Final Fantasy game. I love all the quirky, weird stuff. Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. And my plan, Andrew, is that when I finish this game, I'm going to go get Final Fantasy VII on probably Xbox Live or something. And the only thing I'm... Yeah,
Yes.
The only thing I want to ask, maybe you can tell me, Andrew, should I play into the part where the remake ends, or should I play through the game? I'm not worried about like spoiling myself for future entries, because who knows when that next game's going to come. But how do you think would be best? Should I just play through the classic?
So, I know how Remake ends.
Okay.
And it is different than the original game.
Okay.
Ask me that question after you finish Remake. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
It's something that, like, that's a decision and that's a conversation to have after you finish Remake.
Gotcha. I like that. It lets me know. I like that.
Yes, hit me up. Hit me up on Twitter and ask me after you finish it.
Cool.
But I will say, like, you are getting into the best part of the game.
Hell yes.
It gets better. I was really down on the beginning of that game, being a big Final Fantasy fan. I enjoyed the combat, but not much else.
Yeah.
It gets better and better and better.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited for you.
That's pretty much it for me on the gaming side of things. Dom, what have you been doing? FF7 Remake?
Not yet, actually. My copy shows up tomorrow because I can get something like Final Fantasy delivered to my house, but I can't find toilet paper anywhere.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, I'm pumped to get it started because, I've never played a Final Fantasy game either.
Yes.
And I know I'm a week late to the party here, but this seems
Real quick,
like a
sorry
good
to
spot
interject.
to start.
Andrew, we were both sold by the demo, which is a whole conversation of like, demos returning is great because it sold two of us on this game, right? So, yeah, anyways. Sorry, Dom.
But yeah, so I'm pretty pumped. This appears to be a great starting point for someone who's never played any of the games or isn't that normally huge on JRPGs. So I'm pretty excited to get it started. But yeah, more to come next week on that. So what I have been doing instead is, well, first of all, watching Better Call Saul, which is, oh my God, incredible. Nice. But as far as games, been playing a lot of Star Wars Battlefront 2 because it's been a while and I forgot I had that still downloaded, and it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. I'm really surprised. It's just a ton of fun. It's nothing that, like, I guess is going to totally blow your socks off new and innovative, but it's just, there's something about, doing a 4v4 heroes versus villains mode where, your team is comprised of a little rolling droid, Kylo Ren, Count Dooku in pajamas, and you're fighting Luke Skywalker and Rey and Lando Calrissian. It doesn't make any damn sense. And you're doing it on, like Naboo.
No Man's Sky, right? Like, the updates have turned that into a completely different game than it was at launch, and it's, like, really good now.
Yeah, it's been a big fan.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I didn't get into it when I first got it close to launch, but now it's like, this is so much fun. I've been playing a shit ton of it. I anticipated starting Fallout 76 Wastelanders, but I haven't even turned that on because I've been really having a lot of fun with Battlefront. So yeah.
Nice.
I'm still holding out for 76 to come to Game Pass. I'm still holding out hope one day.
It's gotta happen eventually,
or at least for it to go free to play.
Yeah, as like a big Bethesda guy, I'm not going to spend money on it. It's just my personal hang up, but I definitely want to play it. So I'm like, one day. Man,
it's been down to like $10 at times, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not on Xbox Live. I have never seen it for $10. If it was $10, I would have snagged it. The cheapest it's been on Xbox, from what I've seen, is $20, and even that's a little steep for me. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying the Star Wars Battlefront 2. Ever since Fallen Order, then we got Mandalorian, so like I've craved some Star Wars. I don't know if I'd want to hop into that necessarily because I'm already juggling so many multiplayer games, but the updates and praise for said updates have really got me interested in trying it out at some point. Maybe by the time Battlefront 3 is announced, who knows if it ever gets announced. Andrew, what have you been playing?
A lot of JRPGs.
Interesting.
Final Fantasy VII Remake. I got it last Thursday. My wife's favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII.
Awesome.
So at one point we had 3 copies of that game in our house. 2 versions of the deluxe edition and then a version of the regular edition. Her mom now has the copy of the regular edition because Jessica bought it for her mom because it's also her mom's favorite game of all time. So her mom's learning how to use a PS4, which is a treat. But yeah, I've been playing that. Dragon Quest XI on Switch, I've been playing since Christmas, and it's just a very long game. So that's kind of like my just laying in bed, play Switch for a little bit game. And then Persona 5 Royal. I've been Uppercut got a review code for it that Jess, my wife, was playing it, and so luckily that means I get to play it as well. So it rules. I'm very early into it just because Final Fantasy came out not long after, and it was like right around Animal Crossing time and stuff too. But yeah, I'm really excited to really dive back in there after I platinum Final Fantasy VII, which I'm close-ish.
Man, that game has me so intrigued because up until lately, I've really kind of been like making fun of it in a way of like, how are they really charging $60 for the base game and an extra? Why isn't this just a DLC pack for $20 or $30 or whatever? I didn't totally understand it. I guess after watching a bunch of reviews and that kind of thing, it seems like it's substantial and different. Yeah. And having tried playing Persona 4 like 2 years ago, I kind of burned out after like 20 hours.
Fair.
But I'm not a JRPG guy at all.
I see. I am.
Yeah, and
So
that was now an older game. But 5 looks, I don't know, like just walking around in like the city looks really cool, and I find myself intrigued.
So one of the things that I like about 5 more than 4, I think I like 4 more overall, but 5 not having the randomly generated dungeons or procedurally generated dungeons is great.
Okay, so it's not the same hallway like over and over
No,
again.
it is a set structure that has puzzles that you must navigate through.
Gotcha.
And it helps not burn out on that game as quickly because you have a clear objective. You roughly know where your destination is. Get to it.
I'm in a weird place. I own Persona 5, right?
Oh yeah.
And I want to eventually play it, especially now during quarantine when we're going to be hitting our backlogs up.
Right.
I'm in a weird place where, like, do I wait for Persona 5R to go on sale? Or do I just play this one? And the other thing, too, that has me worried is I heard people say, like, yeah, if you want to play Persona the right way, you should get, like, a guide so you know you're making the most out of the days and whatever. And, like, that whole thing is, like, kind of makes me not want to start it at all.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Like, min-maxing the days.
Don't, like, min-maxing in Persona, like, if you're going for the platinum, yeah. Like, I played through the whole game, and then I went back and I started my platinum run, and I did use a guide because it's very difficult to do without one. But just to enjoy the story, just play through it. Like,
I'm an Xbox guy, so I'm never going to go for the plat. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Spider-Man's the only game I've went for a plat, so it's like, yeah, that's good.
Yes. So, yeah, just play the game. Have fun. Like, it's such a fun game. And, like, I'm not very far in Royal. Like, I'm only a couple hours in, so I haven't really even seen the new stuff. But the new stuff they have added from, like, watching Jess play, great. Like, absolutely incredible stuff. Like, real quality of life improvements, new story beats, new mechanics, and, like, combat and, like, movement. So I would say wait for Royal to go on sale, especially if you're not, like, super itching to play it, like, you're not dying. Yeah, wait for Royal to go on sale. Yeah, that'd be my advice.
It hurts to hear, but I think it's a smarter decision if it does that much to enhance the game. That's a weird thing. Is like Persona 5 was like a really well-reviewed game, and then this game came out. It's like, oh, it's really
even better.
Yeah.
It adds an entire new party member. It adds a new semester of like content because it's based on school semesters. So it adds a substantial amount of stuff. Like it's worth the $60 reinvestment if you're a Persona fan. Definitely, if you haven't played Persona 5 yet, then yeah, definitely just jump onto Royal because you're experiencing everything.
Well, and the fact I haven't started yet, right? So I'm not like, oh, do I ditch my current save or anything? I literally haven't started it, so I'm in a good place.
Like, I know people who are like, oh, I went 30 hours in, I fell off, I rebought Royal, and I'm going to restart. I'm like, you're probably going to still fall off at the 30-hour mark. But yeah, if you haven't started it, yeah, just wait for Royal. Just get Royal.
Also, that troubles me of like people who are like, oh, 30 hours and I fell. For me, I'm very hard-headed. So I'm like, if I've already committed 30 hours to something, I'm going to see it through.
That's a
and
lot.
That's just me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
anything else, Andrew? Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, I think I clocked in Persona 5. I finished it in like 100 hours, like 98, 100 hours. Royal is estimated to take an extra 15 to 30. So it's a long-ass game.
If it's enjoyable, man, who cares? To me, it's like, yeah, it's a lot of time investment, but it's like, if it's an experience you're actively enjoying, then cool.
I think it's worth it, personally. Yeah. I don't think it's a game for everyone, for sure, but I think it's at least, like, if you put some time into it and you enjoy it, I think it ends up being worth it. But, like, if you don't like JRPGs, like my sister-in-law tried playing it and was not for her. So, like, yeah, it's not worth it for her. I'm not going to recommend her play that. So...
I'm like with JRPGs. To me, it's like a lot of people who aren't into From games but fell in love with Bloodborne. Like it just takes the right JRPG for me to get hooked. You know what I mean? Like it's not my preferred genre, but I'm down to get lost in a JRPG adventure.
That's for you then.
Now that we're closing out the show, before we go, thank you, Andrew, for guesting. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
Can you let the listeners and viewers know where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Twitter at Cogswell, and you can find my work. I'm the video editor over at Uppercut, so at Uppercut Crit or uppercutcrit.com. but I do occasional reviews, and we do monthly themed weeks where we cover a certain game for a week, and I contribute writing for those. So yeah, you can find me over there at Uppercut Crit and
Awesome.
uppercutcrit.com.
Also, shout out to you having a really cool last name. It's cool to me anyways. I like
Thank
the
you.
last name Cogswell. It's like, yeah, that's cool.
I had friends in high school that literally didn't know my first name.
Oh, they just called you Cogswell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was like on the football team and all that stuff. And usually when you're in football or sports,
Yep.
your last name, if it's different enough, that's what you get called. So I was often called Weich for my high school career. So
Yeah.
Is Cogswell the name of the robot in Fallout, or am I tripping?
It's the name of. It's not the name of the robot in Fallout, but it is the name in the Jetsons of George Jetson's rival company, Cogswell Cogs. Cogsworth is Beauty and the Beast. And I think Cogsworth is also Fallout.
Yeah.
Fallout is
that sounds
Codsworth.
right.
Yeah, Codsworth.
Yeah, so it's close on a few different things, but it is actually like we are in the Jetsons. Yeah,
Cogswell, dope butler name.
right.
Yeah.
What everyone wants to hear.
Yeah. If you can, please follow us on YouTube. Search Controlled Interests will pop right up. So hit the subscribe button, like the video if you like the podcast. Hit the notification bell. YouTube sub boxes are really fickle and you can't trust them. You don't know what's going to pop in and what's not. So hit the bell notification so you know when we upload new videos. On iTunes, if you leave us a 5-star review, it helps us move up in the algorithm. Leave us a review, period. If you think it's 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, anything less than that, you can do something else if you want. If you also, we're recently announced that we're on Spotify finally. The approval process took a little bit, but we finally got up on there, which is great. So if you listen to your podcast like I do through Spotify, we're up there. The link is in the description of the YouTube video if that's the way you're taking in the podcast. On Twitter, you can find the Controlled Interest account at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interest abbreviated. You can find me personally at Jared_. Still trying to get the regular, Jared, but that guy hasn't tweeted in 4 years. Twitter's still not giving it to me. And you can follow Dom at Dom's Oreos. And yeah, hopefully we have you back in the future, Andrew. I really like talking to you. Awesome things you guys are doing over there at Uppercut, man. It's great to see.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
We'll catch you guys in episode 186 next week. See you then. Bye.